So, usually when we talk about getting a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of absolute precision, you know?
Right, yeah. Like it's a binary thing.
Exactly. Like you break your arm, you go in, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, there it is.
Mm-hmm. The problem is isolated.
Right. The treatment is clear, and the outcome is, well, it's somewhat predictable.
Yeah, you put a cast on it and you wait.
But when you look at our relationship with artificial intelligence right now, it's like that x-ray machine is just producing static.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Just total noise.
Yeah, we're staring at this technological and regulatory landscape that is just incredibly murky, and the stakes, I mean, they're getting higher by the minute.
They really are.
So today, for you, the listener, we are pulling apart a stack of sources that perfectly captures this messy moment. And to set the timeline, we are in August 2026 right now. We're looking at these translated excerpts detailing a massive clash in global governance, an in-depth interview with a really outspoken AI safety advocate, and a structural breakdown of the monumental European Union AI Act.
Which is huge. And, the timing for this deep dive is just critical.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we're sitting at this juncture where this technology is simultaneously embedding itself into the absolute minutia of our daily routines.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
While also terrifying a massive segment of the public.
Right.
So we are going to explore the mechanics behind that fear, the radical demands being made to halt the industry entirely, and how the U.S. and Europe have taken just diametrically opposed paths to control it.
Yeah, and to jump right in, there's a translated quote from a Handelsblatt interview in our sources that really sets the tone here.
Oh, the cancer quote.
Yes, the cancer quote. It's staggering. The statement is, "The world should not be saddled with a problem that is much worse than cancer."
Yeah, that is heavy.
It's incredibly heavy. I mean, framing artificial intelligence not just as like a software tool with some bugs, but as a terminal global disease if we get it wrong.
It's a very specific rhetorical choice.
Right. So to understand why someone would use that kind of apocalyptic language and why severe binding regulation is all anyone is talking about right now, we have to look at the current public sentiment.
Mm-hmm. How you, the public, are actually reacting to all this.
Exactly. And the data from our sources tells a highly contradictory story.
It really does. There's this February 2026 report from Pew Research that maps out exactly where the American public stands, and it shows deep, deep societal ambivalence.
Yeah, the numbers are kind of wild.
They are. Because on one hand, adoption is just accelerating so rapidly.
Yeah.
The report shows that 49% of Americans are now using chatbots, at least occasionally.
Almost half the country.
Basically half the country, yeah.
Yeah.
Integrating this tech into their workflows, their homework, daily communication, and that's a massive leap from just 33% back in 2024.
But the usage metrics only tell half the story, right? Because while we're adopting it at record speed, the anxiety is actually outpacing the utility.
Yeah, that's the paradox.
That same Q report found that 63%, so almost two-thirds of Americans, believe the technology is advancing too quickly.
Oh, wow.
And even more telling, 50% say they are more concerned than excited about the role of AI in their daily lives.
So the people using it are also afraid of it.
Exactly. It's like we're on a high-speed train that we use to commute every single day, right?
Right.
We can completely rely on it to get to the office. But half the passengers on this train are just frantically pulling the emergency brake because they can't see who is driving the engine.
And nobody seems to know if there are actually tracks laid out ahead.
Yes, that tension between high utility and high dread, it brings us directly to the person who made that worse than cancer comparison.
Right, Holly Elmore.
Exactly. And her background provides such crucial context for why she views it this way.
Yeah, because she isn't a computer scientist.
No, not at all. She's not a software engineer. She actually holds a PhD from Harvard in organismic and evolutionary biology.
Right.
She previously worked in effective altruism and wild animal welfare, studying systemic risks in biological ecosystems.
Which seems like a weird jump at first.
It really does. But she completely pivoted her focus to AI risk, founding and acting as the executive director of PauseAI US.
And, I mean, the name PauseAI lays the agenda completely bare.
That's not subtle.
No, it's the U.S. branch of this global movement, and they have a highly specific mission. They aren't asking for, like, better user guidelines or watermarks.
Right, they don't care about the small stuff.
Exactly. They're trying to educate the public and organize grassroots advocacy to push for an international treaty that would legally halt the development of what they call frontier models.
And just to clarify, those are the most advanced, most computationally intensive AI systems currently being trained by the major tech labs, right?
Correct. The bleeding edge of the tech. And, moving from wild animal welfare to AI risk sounds like a massive leap, but it makes complete sense when you examine how she frames the threat.
Yeah, her moral framing is probably the most vital takeaway from her interview in our sources.
Absolutely.
She is treating unaligned superintelligence, so an AI system that doesn't share human values or follow instructions, as a preventable global health catastrophe.
Right. She's trying to shift the entire paradigm from a debate about tech policy
Mm.
to one about existential global defense.
She isn't worried about chatbots writing bad poetry.
Well,
She's worried about structural vulnerabilities in the development pipeline that the developers themselves cannot control. And she points to this concept called capability overhang.
mm-hmm. Which is fascinating.
It really highlights a terrifying blind spot in how these systems learn. So, capability overhang is this idea that these massive frontier models possess dangerous skills that the developers don't even know about prior to release.
Wait, so the people building it don't know what it can do?
Exactly, because these models are essentially black boxes, right? They're trained on unfathomable amounts of unstructured internet data through unsupervised learning.
But they're just absorbing the internet.
Yeah, and they make connections and develop capabilities that aren't explicitly programmed into them.
And that underlying mechanism is what makes it so concerning to safety advocates. When a model digests, trillions of parameters, its full spectrum of abilities isn't always apparent in a controlled lab test.
Right.
The fear is that these latent, potentially dangerous capabilities, like, say, the ability to persuasively manipulate users or synthesize chemical weapon recipes, they only reveal themselves after the model has been deployed to millions of users.
Yeah, when it's too late.
Exactly. When people interact with it in unpredictable edge cases, you literally don't know the overhang exists until it collapses on the public.
That is such a vivid image, and she pairs that with a secondary warning about what she calls governance lock-in.
Right, the economic side of it.
Yeah. Her argument is that by pushing these models into the economy without strict oversight, we are cementing these hasty, arbitrary solutions into our political and financial infrastructure.
So if we wait until major societal functions, like banking or the power grids or healthcare logistics, are entirely reliant on these unproven models.
Then the financial cost of rolling them back just becomes way too high.
Yep.
The political will to apply real safety controls simply evaporates because, the disruption to the economy would be too severe.
We'd be stuck with it.
And this leads to her most aggressive critique of the tech industry. Elmore completely dismisses the current safety evaluations being run by AI companies as just safety theater.
Safety theater, yeah.
Because she believes nobody truly knows the upper limits of a model's capabilities, so she argues that internal corporate-led evaluations are fundamentally inadequate. They exist mostly to placate regulators while development just continues unabated.
See, I have to push back on that a bit, though.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Calling the current safety protocols theater feels overly dismissive of the actual engineering happening behind the scenes.
It is a very harsh critique.
It is. Because the dominant approach in the tech industry and within U.S. policy is that you manage risks through iterative deployment and rigorous red teaming.
Right, which we should probably explain.
Yeah, so for those unfamiliar, red teaming involves unleashing these specialized internal teams to intentionally attack the model.
They're trying to break it.
Exactly. They try to jailbreak it, trick it into generating malware, or bypass its safety filters so the developers can patch those specific vulnerabilities before release. The industry argues that you cannot fix unknown flaws without observing how the model operates under stress.
Which is a valid engineering point.
Right. Furthermore, if we enforce the blanket international halt that Elmore wants, we run headfirst into a massive geopolitical counterargument.
Yeah, and that geopolitical argument is the primary fault line dividing the debate in the United States right now. On one side, you have existential risk advocates like Elmore arguing that competitive advantage is totally irrelevant if the technology ultimately causes catastrophic harm.
Right, the logic being that building a dangerous system faster just to beat an adversary is a losing strategy.
Exactly. But then the pro-innovation camp points out that ceding the frontier of AI to adversarial nations carries its own existential risks.
Oh, absolutely, because if democratic nations pause development, Authoritarian regimes will simply accelerate theirs,
Mm-hmm.
and then they potentially dominate the global economy and military landscape with systems that have absolutely zero alignment with democratic values.
Right. They argue that you cannot regulate a technology you don't understand, and you can't understand it without building and deploying it.
It's a catch-22. But, Elmore's intense frustration with what she calls safety theater stems directly from the reality of the regulatory landscape in the U.S. right now.
Oh, absolutely. Because it's operating in a profound federal void.
It really is.
There is no comprehensive federal AI law on the books in the United States. The approach relies heavily on the NIST AI risk management framework.
Which is voluntary, right?
Completely voluntary, set of guidelines. Beyond that, there's sector-specific guidance from various agencies and some executive orders aimed at fostering innovation while managing immediate risks.
Right, but the overarching federal posture is distinctly pro-innovation.
Very much so. The executive branch has even sought to preempt state-level regulations from creating too much friction for these companies.
But because the federal government hasn't established hard, binding rules, individual states are stepping in to fill the vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
Our sources note that developers are now facing this fragmented patchwork of 48 different state laws attempting to govern AI.
Which sounds like a nightmare.
Oh, it is. Places like California, Colorado, and Texas are leading the charge. And it creates a massive compliance headache.
I can imagine.
Think about it. If Colorado mandates a specific type of algorithmic auditing for hiring software, and California demands a completely different privacy standard for the training data,
Hey.
a developer pushing a single software update has to navigate a multi-jurisdictional legal maze.
Yeah.
And from a safety perspective, advocates argue this fragmented approach completely lacks the centralized oversight necessary to actually manage frontier models.
It's too disjointed. And this fragmented post-market approach in the U.S. stands in stark contrast to the strategy across the Atlantic.
Oh, it's night and day.
The European Union AI Act represents a fundamentally different philosophy of governance. I mean, it is the world's first comprehensive, legally binding, risk-based AI law.
Not voluntary guidelines.
No, not at all. It is a strict regulatory regime that applies directly across all member states.
The structural difference is just profound. When I was reading the sources, it struck me that the EU is essentially treating artificial intelligence the way we treat pharmaceuticals.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Because before a pharmaceutical company can sell a new drug, they have to prove to a centralized agency that it's safe.
Right, they run extensive clinical trials.
They secure pre-market approval.
Yeah.
But the US, conversely, is treating AI more like a standard smartphone app update.
Yeah, just push it out.
Exactly. You ship the code quickly, get it into the hands of users, and if it breaks something or causes harm, well, the legal system handles it after the fact through lawsuits and agency action.
Move fast and break things, basically. But the pre-market logic of the EU AI Act extends its influence far beyond Europe's borders. It does this through a phenomenon known as the Brussels effect.
I love that term.
It's so accurate. The European Union basically leverages the sheer economic size of its single market to dictate global corporate behavior.
Right.
Any provider of a general-purpose AI operating within the EU is subject to this act. So for U.S. tech labs, it's logistically and financially unviable to build one highly regulated AI for European consumers and a separate unregulated AI for everyone else.
Right. You're not going to maintain two completely different code bases like that.
Exactly. Consequently, by setting the rules for access to the European market, Brussels inadvertently sets the global standard for AI compliance.
Which is wild. So since this act is the closest thing we have to the central oversight that the PauseAI movement is advocating for, we really need to examine the actual mechanisms of how it functions.
Definitely.
Because regulating an algorithm is inherently difficult, right? The technology evolves faster than the legislative process ever could.
Always.
So the EU attempted to solve this by regulating the specific risk of the use case rather than trying to regulate the underlying code itself. And the act categorizes AI into 4 distinct risk tiers.
Right. It's unacceptable, high, limited, and minimal.
Exactly. And the rollout of these regulations has been staggered leading up to right now.
Yeah, so in February 2025, the EU initiated the first phase by outright banning practices categorized as an unacceptable risk.
Just off the table completely.
Yes. This targeted systems that inherently threaten fundamental rights. So things like government-run social scoring, manipulative AI designed to bypass human free will, and real-time biometric categorization in public spaces.
Those are just strictly illegal within the EU now?
Correct.
Then following the bans, August 2025 introduced the rules for general-purpose AI, bringing the foundation models, so the massive systems from companies like OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, under regulatory scrutiny.
Right.
And that brings us to this exact moment, August 2026.
The big deadline.
Yeah.
As of this month, the core obligations for high-risk systems have become mandatory.
And high risk applies to a lot of critical stuff.
Yeah, high-risk classification applies to AI used in sensitive, high-stakes areas. We're talking healthcare, employment and hiring, educational admissions, critical infrastructure management, law enforcement.
So deploying an AI to scan resumes in Paris or analyze medical imaging in Berlin?
It now requires intense regulatory compliance, proper documentation, and continuous human oversight.
Wow. And the Act also demands strict enforceable rules for those frontier models that Holly Elmore was warning about, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Providers of these advanced systems must adhere to mandatory notification protocols with the newly established AI office. They're required to conduct rigorous adversarial testing, so literally forcing the system into hostile conditions to ensure it doesn't break down or generate dangerous outputs.
Right.
And they have to report any severe incidents immediately. But crucially, the Act establishes a highly specific technical threshold to determine which models actually pose a systemic risk.
Yeah, and this is where things get really technical, but it's important. The threshold for systemic risk is currently set at a training compute level of 10 to the power of 25 FLOPs.
10 to the 25th FLOPs? Wait, what does that actually mean in practice?
Right, so FLOPs, or floating point operations, basically serve as a metric to measure the raw computational horsepower required to train an AI model. If a model requires more than that astronomical number of calculations during its training phase, the EU automatically classifies it as a systemic risk.
Got it.
And that triggers the most stringent oversight mechanisms in the Act. The European AI Office was created to police this, and they hold the power to demand internal technical documentation, mandate corrective safety measures, and even issue massive financial penalties for non-compliance.
Now, on paper, this looks like the exact type of legally binding pre-market enforcement that safety advocates have been demanding, right?
It looks perfect on paper.
Exactly. But as these critical August 2026 deadlines arrive, our sources reveal some severe structural weaknesses in how this massive regulatory machine is actually operating.
Yeah, it's not looking great behind the scenes.
No. The most glaring issue is the stark reality of the enforcement mechanism.
The staffing.
The staffing. The EU AI Office's Enforcement Unit, which is the specific team tasked with auditing and policing the most advanced, complex, and potentially dangerous frontier models in the world, they are beginning their mandate with a staff of just 36 officials.
36. It's just staggering.
It's absurd.
The resource mismatch is profound.
Yeah.
You have 36 government officials attempting to oversee global frontier models developed by the most well-funded tech corporations in human history.
Right.
These companies employ thousands of top-tier researchers. They utilize billions of dollars in compute infrastructure, attempting to deeply audit a trillion-parameter model with a few dozen regulators just so. It strains credulity.
It does. I mean, while the EU hopes to scale that office to 160 officials by 2030, the immediate reality has generated significant internal doubts about the Act's viability.
And those doubts are coming from the very architects of the legislation.
Right.
Gabriele Mazzini, who is the principal drafter of the AI Act, has publicly expressed reservations about the current framework as it goes live.
Which is never a good sign.
No. When the person who wrote the law questions its efficacy during its most critical rollout phase, it signals a deep structural problem.
Yeah.
Furthermore, Mario Draghi, a deeply influential voice in European economics, has actively advocated for suspending the high-risk provisions entirely.
Really? Just suspending them?
Yes, because the business sector is applying immense pressure. They're arguing that the staggering costs of compliance are actively suffocating the European tech sector, rendering them basically unable to compete with the US and China.
Wow. And beyond the staffing and the economic concerns, there is a fundamental technical flaw in the legislation itself regarding that systemic risk threshold we talked about.
The FLOPs.
Yes. The metric of 10 to the 25th FLOPs is proving to be empirically unusable in practice.
How so?
The logic behind the flaw is actually quite simple. The tech companies do not publicly log or share the exact number of FLOPs used to train their proprietary models.
Oh, because it's a trade secret.
Exactly. Compute usage is a highly sensitive trade secret. If a company reveals exactly how much compute they used, competitors can reverse engineer their hardware setup and their training efficiency.
Oh, well, yeah.
So because developers actively obscure this data, the EU has based its strictest regulatory threshold on a metric they cannot independently verify without invasive audits.
Audits that the AI office currently lacks the manpower to execute.
Because they only have 36 people.
Right. So it's a phantom metric.
It really is.
This rollout really encapsulates the ultimate stress test for AI governance.
Yeah, it does.
The European Union has constructed this template for the robust, enforceable oversight that advocates like Holly Elmore argue is necessary to prevent a global catastrophe. Yet this regulatory apparatus is stepping into the arena hampered by severe staffing shortages, technical ambiguities in its own legislation, and massive political pushback regarding economic competitiveness.
It's a tough spot. We started by looking at the everyday user, right? Increasingly relying on these tools while feeling this gnawing anxiety that the technology is moving beyond our control.
Right.
We explored the existential perspective of safety advocates who view the U.S. approach of voluntary guidelines and iterative red teaming as a direct path toward unmanageable capability overhang. We contrasted that fragmented, innovation-first environment in the U.S. with the European Union's massive centralized attempt to treat AI like a highly regulated pharmaceutical product.
Yeah.
And we examined the fragile reality of that European framework as it attempts to police exponential technology with incredibly limited resources.
Which leaves us with a really critical, lingering question to consider as you, the listener, process all this information.
Sure.
We are attempting to govern a technology that safety advocates genuinely believe poses a threat worse than global disease.
Right.
Yet our most comprehensive, legally binding defense currently relies on a small office of government officials in Europe who are struggling to enforce rules using mathematical metrics they can't even accurately measure.
Which forces us to ask, are we placing entirely too much faith in the idea that traditional 20th century government bureaucracies can ever move fast enough? Or even possess the technical depth required to control 21st century exponential technology?
It's something you really have to think about.
It is. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep questioning the frameworks being built around you, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.